They mocked the beggar, certain he was nothing. His rags made them laugh, his silence made them bold. But what they did not know was that the very man they scorned carried something greater than their wealth. And soon, their laughter would turn to silence. In the heart of Lagos, tall glass buildings touched the sky, filled with men in suits and women in bright Ankara dresses. But outside those shiny doors sat Chike, a poor beggar. His clothes were torn, his sandals mismatched, and dust covered his face. People passed him every morning, never looking twice. To them, he was invisible, just another shadow on the street. On this hot afternoon, powerful billionaires gathered in one of those towering buildings. They were desperate. A strange mathematical equation, one that could save or destroy their empire, stood unsolved on a giant whiteboard. Experts had tried, and failed. The room buzzed with frustration. "If we can't solve this, we lose everything," one man shouted. But outside, Chike lifted his tired eyes. He heard the arguments through the glass doors. Something stirred within him. With courage no one expected, he wiped his hands on his ragged shirt and whispered, "Maybe I can try." Slowly, he stood up and walked toward the very doors no beggar dared to touch. Chike's weak hands pushed the heavy glass doors open. The guards frowned immediately. "Where do you think you're going?" one barked, grabbing his arm roughly. Inside, the billionaires sat around a polished mahogany table, their eyes sharp like hawks. This was no place for a beggar. The guards laughed. "You don't belong here." But Chike didn't resist. His voice was calm, almost unsettling. "I only want to help." The sound of his voice reached the boardroom. Some executives peered out, curious. What they saw made them burst into laughter. "Look at him," a woman said, holding her designer bag tightly. "A beggar wants to solve what professors couldn't." The room filled with mockery. Some snapped pictures with their phones, already thinking of jokes for social media. But Chike didn't flinch. His eyes, deep, sharp, and strangely intelligent, locked onto the whiteboard where the stubborn equation stood. Silence slipped into his voice as he repeated, "Give me a chance." The room roared louder with laughter. Yet in that moment, one old executive stopped laughing. His face froze. He stared at Chike with growing curiosity, wondering, who exactly is this man? The chairman of the meeting, Chief Adeyemi, slammed his hand on the table. "Enough," he thundered. His gold wristwatch glittered under the light. "If this beggar thinks he can solve it, let him try. Perhaps his foolishness will entertain us." The room erupted with more laughter. Some clapped mockingly, others shook their heads in disbelief. The guards released Chike reluctantly. With slow, steady steps, he walked barefoot across the marble floor. Every footstep echoed louder than the mocking voices. His ragged shirt swayed as if he carried not shame, but destiny. He picked up the marker. The entire boardroom held its breath, waiting to see him embarrass himself. "This is madness," one man whispered. Chike's hand moved across the whiteboard with surprising confidence. Numbers, symbols, and lines flowed as if he had written them 1,000 times before. Laughter rang out again, louder this time. "Nonsense," someone shouted. "He's just scribbling like a child." But then, one executive leaned forward, her smile fading. Her pen slipped from her fingers. The more she studied his work, the more her laughter died. Something terrifyingly brilliant was unfolding before their eyes. At first, the boardroom was alive with cruel laughter. Some executives slapped the table, tears of amusement in their eyes. "Only in Africa will a beggar claim to be a genius," one shouted. Phones kept recording, hoping to capture his humiliation. Yet as Chike continued writing, his strokes became sharper, cleaner, and purposeful, like an artist painting a masterpiece. Slowly, the laughter cracked. The numbers aligned. The symbols balanced. The impossible started to look possible. One man in glasses adjusted his frame, leaning closer. Another, a stern woman with red head tie, dropped her phone on the table, eyes wide. The room grew quieter with every second. The air felt heavier, as though destiny itself had walked into that meeting. Chief Adeyemi, who moments ago mocked the beggar, now leaned back in his chair, speechless. He tapped the table nervously. Chike finally placed the marker down. His last line connected perfectly, sealing the equation with flawless precision. The silence that followed was deafening. The executives exchanged glances, their earlier arrogance melting into shock. One whisper slipped through the tension. "My God, he solved it." The room froze. Not a single pen tapped, not a single whisper of laughter. Chike stood there quietly, marker still in his hand, like a lion that had silently claimed its territory. The impossible equation, once mocked, once feared, now rested solved on the board. Every line made sense. Every symbol carried truth. One of the executives, Mrs. Oluchi, whispered under her breath. "But how? Even our professors failed." The man with glasses stood up, walking slowly to the whiteboard, eyes wide with disbelief. He checked every symbol, every calculation. His hands trembled. "This," he gasped. "This is flawless." The room buzzed with murmurs, not of mockery, but of awe and fear. Chief Adeyemi's voice finally broke the silence. His tone was no longer mocking, but sharp, suspicious. "Who are you, beggar? How do you know this?" His eyes narrowed. The others leaned forward, waiting. Chike's lips curved into a faint smile, but he said nothing. The mystery deepened, wrapping the room in tension. The billionaires, once so proud, now sat like students before an unexpected teacher. The silence shattered with a harsh voice. Mr. Bako, a tall man in a navy blue agbada, slammed his fist on the table. "Lies!" he barked. "This beggar must have copied it somewhere. He cannot solve what the brightest minds in Africa failed to solve." His words lit the room like fire. Some nodded quickly, eager to believe the shameful truth, that their laughter wasn't misplaced. But Mrs. Oluchi shot up from her seat, eyes blazing. "Don't be blind, Bako. You saw it with your own eyes. Every number aligns, every solution is perfect. This man has done what none of us could." Her words carried power, echoing through the grand boardroom. The room split in two, half still mocking, half now whispering in awe. Chief Adeyemi rubbed his chin, torn between pride and curiosity. He studied Chike like a puzzle far more complex than the one on the board. Meanwhile, Chike remained calm, almost detached, as if he had walked this path before. His silence spoke louder than their arguments. To some, he was a fraud. To others, a miracle. But to everyone, he was no longer just a beggar. Chief Adeyemi finally raised his hand. The room went quiet instantly. His deep voice rumbled. "If this man is truly who he claims not to be, then let him prove it again." He turned to one of the professors seated quietly in the corner. "Give him a harder problem. Something no machine, no expert, has ever solved." The room gasped. Professor Okon, a frail man with gray hair, scribbled furiously on the board. His hands shook as he wrote lines upon lines of complex formulas, the kind that would take mathematicians weeks to understand. He stepped back, sweat dripping down his temple. "Let him try this," he muttered, certain that Chike would finally be exposed. All eyes shifted to Chike. The mockery returned in whispers. "Now he will fail. Now we will see." Yet Chike did not hesitate. He walked calmly to the board, picked up the marker again, and began. His hand flowed like water, smooth and confident. Gasps filled the room as impossible barriers melted under his touch. Some executives leaned forward, unable to breathe. One voice trembled. This is beyond human." Chike's marker moved quickly, but each stroke was precise, deliberate. The executives leaned forward, their earlier arrogance gone. They were no longer laughing, no longer whispering, only watching. The numbers danced like a secret rhythm only Chike could hear. Professor Okon, who had proudly set the trap, walked closer. His eyes darted between the board and Chike's ragged figure. At first, he smirked, waiting for an error. But the smirk vanished. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Chike's solution was not only correct, It was elegant, simplified in a way no textbook had ever explained. The professor's knees weakened. He grabbed the edge of the table, whispering, This is genius." The boardroom erupted into chaos. Some shouted in disbelief, others clapped their hands in shock. The arrogant Mr. Bako buried his face in his palms, unwilling to accept what his eyes had witnessed. Chief Adeyemi remained still, staring at Chaik with a gaze that mixed fear and admiration. For the second time, the impossible had been solved. Chaik stepped back, dropping the marker quietly, his face calm, like a man who had only scratched the surface of what he knew. The tension in the room became unbearable. Phones buzzed, papers scattered, voices clashed. "No ordinary man could do this," one executive whispered. Another muttered, "This is not mathematics, this is something divine." But Chief Adeyemi leaned forward, eyes sharp. "No. This is a man with secrets." His words silenced the room. He snapped his fingers at his assistant. "Find out who this beggar is, now. I want his name, his history, his everything." The assistant rushed out. Meanwhile, Chaik stood silently by the window, staring at the bustling Lagos streets below. The cars, the pedestrians, the city noise, it was as if he felt more connected to them than to the billionaires behind him. Minutes later, the assistant returned, panting. "Sir," he said nervously, "I searched, but there's nothing. No ID, no records, no family ties. It's as if he doesn't exist." Gasps filled the boardroom. A chill ran through the executives. How could a man be so brilliant, yet leave no trace in the world? Eyes turned back to Chaik. For the first time, fear mixed with curiosity. The boardroom fell into uneasy silence. Everyone's eyes burned holes into Chaik, waiting, demanding answers. Chief Adeyemi leaned forward, his voice cold. "Who are you, beggar? No records. No past. Yet you carry knowledge greater than our best minds. Speak." For the first time, Chaik turned to face them fully. His eyes were sharp, but calm, holding a depth that made even the proudest executive shift in discomfort. He spoke slowly, each word heavy. "You measure a man by wealth and clothes. I measure life by wisdom and truth. I was not born to be seen. I was born to be hidden, until the right time." The room shivered. His voice was not loud, yet it carried power. Mrs. Oluchi leaned forward, whispering, "Are you a teacher?" "A professor." Chaik smiled faintly. "No. A teacher lives in classrooms. I have lived in the streets. My classroom was hunger. My chalk was suffering. My textbook, life itself." His words struck like lightning. Some executives bowed their heads, ashamed. Others grew even more restless. Chief Adeyemi clenched his fists. The riddle of Chaik had only just begun. As Chaik's words lingered in the air, the atmosphere in the boardroom shifted. Some executives bowed their heads in respect, but others clenched their jaws. To them, this beggar was not a miracle, he was a danger. If a man from the streets could outshine them so easily, what would the world say of their years of wealth and education? Mr. Bako leaned closer to Chief Adeyemi, whispering with venom. "We cannot let this man humiliate us. Today it is numbers, tomorrow he will claim our seats." Chief Adeyemi said nothing, but the tightness of his jaw revealed his thoughts. Across the table, another executive sneered, "What if he's not even human? What if he's some kind of trickster?" The seeds of envy grew into poisonous roots. But while whispers of conspiracy filled the boardroom, Chaik remained still, watching them with an unreadable expression. It was almost as if he could hear their plotting hearts. Mrs. Oluchi, sensing the danger, spoke firmly, "Be careful. You may fight him, but what if this beggar carries the wisdom we've all been blind to?" Her words were ignored. Plans were already forming in the shadows. Later that evening, after hours of argument, a secret meeting formed among a few powerful executives. They gathered in a corner of the boardroom, voices low but bitter. "This beggar must not outshine us again. Mr. Bako growled. If the public hears of him, our reputations will be dust. Another added, then let us set a problem no human can solve. When he fails, the shame will return to him. The next morning, the boardroom brimmed with tension. A new equation filled the whiteboard, so monstrous, so twisted, it looked less like mathematics and more like chaos itself. Symbols from physics, economics, and pure math merged into one tangled riddle. Chief Adeyemi folded his arms. "Chike," he said with a sly smile. "Solve this, if you can." Laughter returned, this time sharper, crueler. Chike walked to the board again, his bare feet tapping against the polished floor. He studied the scribbles calmly, while the executives exchanged knowing glances. Some smirked, certain his downfall had come. But Chike simply closed his eyes for a moment, whispering words no one understood. Then, with steady hands, he lifted the marker. The trap was ready, but so was he. The boardroom leaned forward like vultures waiting for prey. Chike lifted the marker and began. Slowly, patiently, he untangled the chaos they had drawn. Each line he wrote cut through their deceit like a machete clearing thick bush. His strokes were confident, unshaken. The smirks on the executives' faces began to fade. When he reached the final step, Chike stopped. He turned around, eyes burning with quiet fire. "This was not a problem to be solved," he said calmly. "This was a trap." The room stiffened. He wrote the last symbol with one sharp motion, revealing not just the solution, but also the deliberate errors they had planted. He circled them in red, saying, "Even your deceit cannot hide truth." Gasps erupted. Some executives looked down in shame, while others grew pale with fear. Mrs. Oluchi rose from her seat, her voice trembling. "He exposed everything, even the lies." The arrogant Mr. Bako broke into a sweat, unable to meet Chike's eyes. What was meant to disgrace the beggar had instead revealed the corruption in their hearts. And now, Chike stood taller than all of them. The boardroom was heavy with silence. Chike stood tall in rags, while billionaires in fine suits shrank in shame. His words still echoed, "Even your deceit cannot hide truth." Mrs. Oluchi's eyes filled with tears. She rose slowly. "All my life, I chased wealth. But today, a man with nothing has shown me what riches cannot buy, wisdom." Another executive, a younger man in a sharp gray suit, buried his face in his palms. "My father was a poor farmer," he confessed. "I was ashamed of him. I thought money would erase that shame. But now, I see that I abandoned the very roots that gave me strength." His voice cracked, and the room felt his pain. Even Chief Adeyemi, whose pride was as tall as the Lagos skyline, leaned back in his chair, speechless. For the first time, he saw not a beggar, but a mirror. Chike's ragged figure reflected their emptiness, their hunger for something money could never feed. The men and women who ruled empires now sat humbled before the one they had mocked. The beggar was teaching kings. Chike looked around the room. Billionaires, professors and leaders, once so proud, now sat like children waiting for guidance. He took a deep breath, his voice low but commanding. "You laugh at rags because you fear them. You bow to wealth because you worship it. But wisdom," he tapped his chest, "wisdom lives here, not in gold or titles." The executives listened, hearts heavy. Chike continued, "I slept on cold streets, yet I dreamed solutions that warmed my mind. Hunger was my teacher. Rejection was my training. You see only my torn clothes, but those clothes carried me through storms you have never faced." His words struck like thunder, each one unraveling the illusions of wealth. Mrs. Oluchi wiped her tears. Others bowed their heads, ashamed of their mockery. Chike finished with a piercing truth. A man is not poor because of empty pockets. A man is poor when his mind is empty, when his heart holds no truth. The boardroom went silent again, but this silence was different. It was the silence of awakening. For the first time, they saw dignity not in money, but in a beggar's eyes. The boardroom, once filled with pride and arrogance, now felt like sacred ground. The billionaires who once laughed at Chike could no longer sit still. One by one, they stood. Some removed their expensive jackets, as though shedding the weight of false pride. Chief Adeyemi, the most powerful man in the room, rose last. His eyes softened. "Forgive us," he said quietly. Mrs. Oluchi walked forward. With trembling hands, she bent slightly before Chike. Gasps echoed. The gesture of respect was unheard of in that hall. Then others followed, bowing their heads, not to wealth, not to power, but to wisdom in its purest form. The beggar they mocked was now the man they honored. Chike remained calm, almost sorrowful. He raised his hand gently. "Do not bow to me," he said. "Bow to the truth that lives inside every man and woman. Today you saw it in me, but it lives in you too." His words washed over them like healing rain. The proud executives felt lighter, freer, as though chains had been broken inside their hearts. The executives stood in silence, humbled by Chike's words. For the first time, they felt wealth had no meaning without wisdom. Chief Adeyemi stepped forward. "Stay with us," he pleaded. "We will give you a home, wealth, anything you ask." The room echoed with offers: houses, cars, endless money. But Chike only smiled faintly. He turned his gaze to the streets outside, where barefoot children chased old tires and mothers carried baskets on their heads. "My place is not here," he said softly. "My wisdom is not for the rich alone. It belongs to the forgotten, the broken, the ones who sleep in dust as I did." His words struck deeper than any lesson. The room fell silent again, realizing they could not own him. Before they could protest, Chike laid the marker on the table and walked to the door. His ragged clothes swayed gently as he stepped outside into the golden Lego sun. When the executives rushed after him, he was gone. Vanished into the crowd, like smoke carried by the wind. Some believed he was a genius. Others whispered he was an angel. But all agreed on one truth: wisdom can rise from the most unexpected places. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this message. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and what act of kindness inspired you today. Thanks for being part of this journey. Until next time, remember, even the smallest act of kindness can change a life.